Alright guys, welcome to your 46th UDK tutorial, and in this tutorial I'm going to teach you guys how to make text appear on your screen. Sounds pretty basic, right? But check it out. Whenever you want to give your user a set of instructions or directions, or maybe you just want to, output a nice little message saying, hey, what's up? What are you doing tonight? Well, you want some text to appear on their screen. So there's actually a little more Kismet involved than you may think. So follow along with this tutorial, and by the end, you'll be a pro at making text appear on the screen. So before I even get started with that part of the tutorial, I want to tell you guys this. I probably should have taught you guys this in the last tutorial, but typically, whenever you work with triggers, you just don't go ahead and right click and hit add actor, add trigger, and give a nice little big green trigger that the user can interact with when they're playing their game. You typically don't want the user or player to see that in the game, so you typically put the trigger inside a static mesh. So let me go ahead and explain this a little bit better. I have a static mesh right here that looks like a control panel, and usually you want to have the user interact with something like a control panel or a workstation or maybe a light switch or something. So go ahead and let me just drag this out right there. And now you see this is a lot more appealing to the user rather than a big green switch on the screen. So this is typically what you would have, something like this. Now this is, of course, is just a static mesh. It doesn't have any functionality. It's basically just a 3D model. So what we would want to add is that trigger right next to it. So go ahead and hit add actor, add trigger, and hello, let me reposition that, move down a little bit, and actually let me go ahead and change views. If I move that right underneath, there we go right now. So as you can see, what would be going on is behind the scenes we would have this trigger right next to this static mesh, but whenever the user was playing the game, all they would see is this static mesh. So they would think that they were interacting with this 3D model, but we would know as the game developer that they are indeed standing in the radius of the static mesh, which is causing the program to interact. Because you can't really interact with static meshes, only these triggers. So go ahead and position your trigger somewhere around the static mesh, and then whenever the user is standing right there, they're going to be able to interact with that. So now that we got our trigger on the screen, again, like I said, I want to give you guys a tutorial of how to make text appear on the screen. So go ahead and, like I said, make sure you have your trigger selected and open Unreal Kismet by hitting that K button. And now make sure your trigger is selected and right click and hit New Event using Trigger. Now, in the last tutorial, I taught you guys about the touch event, which pretty much means your player runs up and stands on your trigger or touches it. Well, let's go ahead and use the used event trigger right now. And what used means is the user or player needs to hit a key in order to switch that trigger. So by default, it's the E key. So if the user goes and stands where the static mesh is and they hit E on their keyboard, then whatever we program this trigger to do, that's what's going to happen. So let me go ahead and actually want to change a few things. The first thing we want to change is aim to interact. This means if you have this selected, the user needs to be looking directly at the trigger. So this would actually work if we position this trigger right inside the static mesh, but since it's kind of, underneath it and all around it, we don't want aim to interact. And also max trigger count, go ahead and set this to 0 because remember from the last tutorial, 0 means infinite. So now we got our trigger right here. So now let's do something cool with it. In order to add text to the screen, we need to add something called an announcement. And in order to do that, go ahead and right click to the right of your event and hit New Action, and under the Voice and Announcements category, you're going to want to hit Play Announcement. Now, text on the screen and an announcement are basically the exact same thing. So whenever this says Play Announcement, we're going to give it some text to pop up on the screen, and it also has the option of playing a sound as well. So the very first thing we want to do is tell the UDK, alright, whenever we use our trigger, go ahead and play our announcement. So that's what we're telling it to do via this wire right here. And now you're saying, alright, so how the heck does the UDK know what text to make appear on the screen? Well, let's go ahead and change that right now. If you go ahead and let's take a look at some of these properties. Under announcement right here, we have two subproperties. The first one is the announcement sound, and by default it has no sound, which pretty much means text is going to pop up on your screen, but it's not going to play, any sound. So if you're familiar with like Skype or anything, whenever you send a message to your friends, a little bloop bloop plays, a nice little sound. So let's go ahead and give it a sound right now. And the easiest way to do this is if we go in the content browser and just go ahead and deselect everything. Clear, clear, clear. Go ahead and look for a sound. Start double clicking. Alright, I know you guys can't hear any of this, but we're looking for a sound node wave. And by the way, I know that you guys can't hear sound, and that's because I switched from my old screen recorder to Camtasia again. And that's just because I like Camtasia better. So, just pretend. I'll, give you my voiceover of what the sounds sound like. So go ahead and hit this green button, and it's going to use your currently selected sound, which kind of sounds like this. That was actually a pretty good example. So now the announcement text is, what text do you want to have appear on the screen? And we'll just write, Bucky is awesome like a hoss. And now, with that all programmed in, we're good to go. So again, make sure you have your trigger event, and then make sure for your play announcement that you have an announcement sound, which is optional, and an announcement text, which is kind of required. So now let's go ahead and X out of that, and we'll just go ahead and right click and hit play from here. So by default, if we run up to our switch, nothing happens. And also, it doesn't look as cool as it should because I didn't rebuild my lighting, but for the sake of this tutorial, this nice little black static mesh will do just fine. So remember, we're touching the trigger and nothing's happening, and that's because this isn't a touch trigger anymore, it's a use trigger. So now let me go ahead and hit the E key, and now, as you can see, it says Bucky is awesome like a hoss. And I know you guys can't hear this, but every time I hit it, it goes So, yeah, I'm sorry that I had to switch programs and you guys can't hear my awesome sounds, but trust me, they're there, and that's how you do it. So, again, well, that's basically all that I have to say in this tutorial. So, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.